Good morning. Welcome to Chasing Blazes. Something I've been asked by quite a few people. What are some of the things you were the most afraid of when you were starting to plan your thru hike? Well, I thought that it might be helpful for others to hear when you're planning your thru hike and some of the things that I did to help me prepare. We're taking a walk today. I should say my dog is walking me. And as most of you know, this is Katahdin, and we are going to enjoy this fall day. So let's start. First fear. Sleeping outside in my tent in the woods. Ooh, told you she was taking me for a walk. That was a tough one. It was literally something that kept me up at night, or when I'd wake up in the middle of the night, it was the first thing that I started to think about. How am I going to do that? I'm so afraid of it. Well, as they say, sometimes the best way to handle fear is to face it head on. That's what I did. Once I got my tent, once I settled on my Z-Pax duplex tent, the first thing I started to do once I learned how to set it up was start to sleep in it outside by myself in my backyard. Now, ideally, I would have done a shakedown and gone hiking and stayed in the woods. But at the time, I was healing some injuries from running, and I couldn't do that. Next best thing was to actually try it in my backyard. And it helped a lot. It helped me just get used to sleeping in my tent. It helped me test out my sleep system. I did it a couple of times until, I felt like, okay, I can probably handle it. I also used earplugs because I felt like that would soften all the little sounds around me that might tweak me out or freak me out in the middle of the night if I woke up or if I couldn't sleep. Listening to, and we have a lot of bunnies in our neighborhood, listening to the sound of bunnies, scurrying around my tent was definitely something that my imagination would have gotten the best of me, and then I wouldn't have slept. So I got a pair of cheap earplugs. Later did find out that the silicone earplugs are the best way to go. So I recommend you get those if you're through hiking, because you will be in situations where you need to block out the noise around you. It could be people snoring. It could be people who roll around on their air mattresses. So the earplugs helped me not hear every little sound around me so that I was able to sleep. I recommend, if you are afraid of sleeping outside alone in your tent, the best way to get past that is to do it. Do it in a safe spot to start, like your backyard. Ideally, you do it on an overnight hike so that you're actually out in the woods, a little bit further away from a place where you feel like you know the environment. But in general, it's get out there and do it, because the last thing you want to do is be out on the trail and find out that you can't handle it for whatever reason. It's just too much. And I get it, but you don't want to have made the trek down there, done all the investment in equipment, all of the commitment with your family and everything else, and find out it's just too much. It's okay if it is, but this is one way that I found worked for me and helped me get past that so I could move on to dealing with the other things. Okay, friends. Fear number 2. This was a big one. The Great Smoky Mountains. I was really afraid of what the weather might be in the Smokies and how much food I was going to need to carry. And there were a lot of variables with hiking in the Smokies. And being a seasoned winter hiker at high elevations, I say high elevations meaning in the Northeast. I am accustomed to hiking in the White Mountains in the winter. So I'm well aware of what the conditions can be how quickly they can change and how dangerous it can be when you get snow and ice. So I was really worried about the Smokies. I was dreading it, to be honest, because I didn't know what to expect. So part of trying to minimize my fears was educating myself. Knowledge is power, and this is another example of that being true. So what I did was started to do a ton of research on weather in the Smokies in February, March timeframe. That included a lot of YouTube videos for people that had hiked around the same time that I was going to be in there and getting visuals. I'd read a lot of accounts of people getting stuck in there without enough food and not having proper traction, because how do you know what traction you're going to need if you're in the Smokies and then a snowstorm comes through? I mean, you're either carrying it all with you or cut Todd and easy. Hey, you're either carrying it all with you or you're taking the chance and rolling the dice and hoping that you're not going to need it if you don't have it. Honestly, the day that Chief and Scout and I hiked up into the Smokies, the weather was horrible. It was cold and it was pouring rain. It was a thunderstorm and a tornado warning. So literally we're hiking into the Smokies and all of those fears that I had were coming true. Needless to say, it wasn't a good way to start the Smokies for me. We'd made the decision going into the Smokies that we were going to get in and get out in 5 days. We weren't planning on being able to do any kind of a resupply at Newfound Gap. We weren't planning to go into Gatlinburg, nothing. We decided as a group that we were going to go in with the 5 days of food and get out. And that first night was definitely something to fuel the little fire in my brain. That's for sure. But then the next few days ended up being amazing. We hit a pocket of incredible weather in the Smokies. We really did. So it's really important. Oh, come on. Thank you, Katan. Puppy life. It's really important to prepare as much as you can, but make sure you don't pack your fears. My way of preparing for that was to just keep on top of the weather as I was approaching them. And it's good if you have somebody at home that has traction. If you're starting in February like I did, it has your traction, whatever that might be, whether it's Yak Tracks or Hill Sounds or anything like that, that they can send to you at Fontana Dam before you get into the Smokies. If you're planning to possibly resupply at Newfound Gap and go into Gatlinburg, you got to remember that's like a 15-mile ride, and they close that road for wind. So you don't even have to have a snowstorm coming in for them to close that road. So it's really important. And for me, I didn't want to take the chance of carrying less food and banking on resupplying at Newfound Gap. So you just got to prepare as much as you can with backup plans that are actionable in case you need them. And stick with it and for the best, like everything. I'll share a little secret with you. Not everybody is the same as me, but a big thing for me with all the fears that I had before embarking on my thru hike, I prayed a lot and I put a lot of my faith in God. And I can tell you that for me, that was everything. But that doesn't work for everyone. So hopefully I've given you a few other alternatives to help prepare for how you decide to take on the Smokies. Then again, it may not even be a fear for you, which is great. Alrighty, fear number 3. Did I pack what I need? Or better yet, is there something I'm missing? And am I gonna be stuck in the middle of the woods and not have it? A lot of times people's packs are too heavy because they pack their fears. I definitely started doing that. I can't tell you how many times I packed, weighed everything, repacked, weighed everything again, repacked. I did that a ridiculous number of times, but it was part of that whole working through, will I have everything I need? And I'm going to tell you right now, there's no way that you can possibly pack everything you could possibly need in any situation. But what I can tell you is that unless you're in the Smokies or the 100-mile wilderness, you can pretty much bank on the fact that you are really no more than a few days away from a town. So if you look at it that way, if you try to look at packing to make sure you have what you need, depending on the time of year that you're starting your hike, you need to say, do I have enough of this in case this happens and I need to get to a town? I'll give you an example of one thing, like Band-Aids, my first aid kit. Initially, my first aid kit was the first aid kit you buy from REI, the little one, the one I could find that was the lightest weight, but also pretty comprehensive. It had most of the things you'd need. It had gauze, it had Band-Aids, it had some antibiotic ointment, it had like Imodium AD, but whatever the generic is of that. And it had tweezers and, a bunch of other things. So I went through that pack and I strategically whittled it down considerably. I didn't need 20 Band-Aids. I probably needed a few. I kept the tick tweezers because Lyme disease is very real. So I highly recommend you have something, whatever it is, your method of choice to remove ticks in case you get a tick on you. I didn't keep the gauze. I didn't keep a lot of it. And that was okay. When I ran into trouble, I was able to either borrow what I needed from someone else, because you got to remember, even though you're not hiking with people, you're going to see people on trail. And you're going to probably meet some of the most amazing people you've ever met in your life on trail. I know I did. So I recommend that you don't pack your fears and you still try to go as light as you can and use the sort of mentality that you can get into town in a couple of days and pick it up. The things you need to prepare for are the things that are most likely to happen when you're hiking on the AT and you need to get through a couple days. Hypothermia, okay? That's one thing. So you need to make sure that you have a set of dry clothing, stuff like that. So you just need to be practical and smart. And if you can afford to invest in the lightweight performance equipment, do it. Because how many chances are you going to get to hike the AT, right? So if you can save up for people to give you gifts that are things that you're going to use on your thru hike, and do it that way. But if you can spend the extra money to get lightweight gear that will perform, that is proven to perform, do your research, you'll be happy about it. So making sure you have what you need is all about research and preparation. know the weather conditions for when you're going to go, know the terrain, and know when you can switch things out for different gear. What I just said might have created some questions for you. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I'm happy to help out as much as I can. Or if anybody else has things they want to add, I would love to hear from the community on things that they've done to conquer some of those fears, or tell us about some of the fears you've had and what you did. Let's make this a two-way conversation as much as we can, helping each other out. I hope that was helpful. Strangers. Being a small woman alone in the woods, hiking along the Appalachian Trail, solo, is definitely something that scared me a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. That was a tricky one. And it didn't help that one of the first questions everybody asked me was, after I announced that I was hiking the Appalachian Trail, who are you going with? Then I'd say nobody. Well, aren't you afraid? Are you bringing a gun? Okay, I'm gonna tell you right now, my opinion, hey, sorry, good dog. My opinion, no, you don't need a gun. Again, this is my opinion based on my experience. I don't think you need a gun. I'm going to tell you that I found that 98% of the people that I met on trail were some of the best people, like I've said, that I've ever met. There was maybe 2% that were a little unsettling. And I read about what you do in those situations, and the advice was great that I read online. And that was, talk to the people around you, mention it to others, say, I don't know that I feel comfortable around this person. There's something going on here. They don't give me a warm fuzzy. They're making the hair on the back of my neck stand up, whatever. Tell some other hikers. That community is one of the most supportive and incredible communities you will ever experience in your life. And people will cover you. I promise. Don't be the girl who cried wolf. I tell you that whenever that happened, 9 times out of 10, other people felt the same way. And you were able to stick together or keep tabs on each other and avoid any situations that you think might come up. The other thing too, word travels faster up and down the AT than it does on CNN. So I can tell you right now, if there's somebody that's creepy and causing problems or anything like that, other people are absolutely going to know about it. And you share that information, again, make sure it's valid. You don't want to be saying things about people that are not accurate. Simply just that you just get an odd vibe from somebody, then that's all you got to say. And people are really awesome. And the other thing, if you are just by yourself and you roll up to a shelter and things seem a little weird, give it a few minutes, because I will say that I had a couple situations like that where I'd get to a shelter and it was all guys and I was super uncomfortable because they were strangers. But what I did was give it a few minutes, I didn't unpack everything. I'd go get water. I'd do a couple of other chores before I would settle in for the night and maybe have a little bit of conversation. And literally within 5 or 10 minutes, whatever that initial fear was or concern was gone. And I ended up meeting my first tramily that way on my first night. Give it a couple of minutes without committing, like setting up your whole tent and everything else. If you still feel uneasy, you know what? Just get your water and move on. But I can tell you right now that 98% of the people that you will meet on trail will be some of the best people you've ever met in your life. I promise. So after hearing my fears, you might be thinking to yourself, why would you do this? If you were afraid of all those things, why would you keep going? Why would you keep planning? Why would you decide to go on this journey? Well, first of all, something to know about me is I won't ever let fears make decisions for me. I will never let fear talk me out of something that I want to do. I just won't. So that's my personality. That's just who I am. So for me, having these fears meant that I needed to come up with a plan to deal with them and prepare as much as I could, possibly, and get my head around it. That's just me. Not everybody is wired that way. We're all different. If you're going to be taking on the challenge of hiking the Appalachian Trail, there are going to be more situations than you can count that are going to test your limits mentally, physically, and emotionally. And while it's important to prepare with gear and shakedown hikes and all of those things, that's essential. Don't fast forward over those activities or those actions that need to be taken before a thru hike. Do it. Do as much of that as you can. It's going to give you a huge sense of comfort. You're going to know what to do. You're going to know how to do it. For example, I was worried about setting up my tent in the rain if I was cold and wet. So what did I do? I went for a run in 30-degree rain, freezing rain, and then I went out in my backyard with my tent and I set it up. I made myself, after I had done a workout and I was cold and, well, I was hot, but then I got cold very fast because I was soaking wet. I wanted to see how fast I could set my tent up. And those are the kinds of things you need to do so that you can quell those fears. The more you are prepared and you know your gear and you know how to deal with it, the more confident you're going to feel. I highly recommend that you also don't fast forward on the mental preparation of a thru hike. That's also going to help you with fears. If you do the mental prep, it's going to help you deal with a lot of aspects of how your psyche can have its way with you. I recommend reading 2 books that I found to be extremely helpful. One of them is Pushing North by Trey Free. Very, very informative and helpful book. You have to do the mental prep for an AT thru hike. The other book that I thought was great was Appalachian Trials by Eric Davis. Both I found value in different things in both of them. I liked the why work in Appalachian Trials. That worked well for the way my brain works because I didn't have one thing I was going in there to do this for. It wasn't about one thing for me. It was about a lot of different things. And the way he laid it out worked really well for me. I also recommend that once you get that all figured out and you do the work for that, that you type it up or write it on a piece of paper, stick it in a Ziploc bag, put it in your pack. You're going to need to remind yourself why you're out there a lot. There'll definitely be times when you're just questioning, why am I doing this when I could be home, comfortable in my house, or not in the rain, or all those things. And some days those whys might not even be enough. And it might be the people you're hiking with, honestly, that make a huge difference in your day. So keep your mind and your heart open to the people that you'll meet in this experience because they're a game changer. They were for me. I hope you found this helpful. Please ask questions, leave comments, share information. If you have anything to share, if you have a different opinion on something, share it. Let's get this out in our community so that other people can learn. I think it's important. I don't have all the answers. I don't necessarily have the right answers for you. Those were the things that worked for me with my fears. And if you are not a subscriber, please subscribe and like this video and check out some of the other videos on this channel in case they might be helpful to you for preparing for your thru hike, or if you just want to see what a thru hike is all about. I'll tell you, I put it out there, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So it's not necessarily a sugar-coated journey, not with this chick. So thanks for coming along.